Today, our special guest is Josh Abramson. And in a sec, I'll give a brief background on Josh. In the meantime, my co-host today is my brother, Ricardo, fellow seasoned venture-backed tech founder who leads a number of powerful communities, including the YCAlumni. Any want to add to any of that, Richie?
Nope, just 10 years in Silicon Valley, a second venture-backed company, and yes, founder of the YCAlumni group about 4 years ago with about 4,000 members, and very excited to hear the Josh story.
Cool. Awesome. Josh, just so you know, our Techstars Alumni community made up of the top 1% venture-backed tech founders in the world. So those that are able to join us here, I'm happy to have you all here with us. For a quick reminder, please make sure to keep your cameras on, your mute on, update your profile so that we can see your name and company. We'll dedicate 10 minutes at the end of our chat to Q&A. But as we cover subjects that you have questions, and please feel free to DM me, my brother Ricardo, and we'll make sure to take a look at those questions and incorporate them in our conversation. Having said that, all right, so I'm going to give a quick background on Josh, and then we'll get started with peppering Josh with a ton of questions, brutal questions.
Gruesome.
Yeah, gruesome. Now, all right, so Josh is the co-founder of several renowned digital platforms, so comedy website, CollegeHumor, Vimeo, TeePublic, and more. Josh gained prominence as the co-founder of CollegeHumor in 1999, which under his leadership reached 6 to 8 million monthly visitors and generated over 5 million annually in advertising and t-shirt sales by 2005 as the principal owner of Connected Ventures, parent company of CollegeHumor, and also Vimeo and Busted Tees. Josh orchestrated a $20 million sale to IAC Interactive Corp in 2006, laying the foundation for subsequent ventures. In 2011, Josh repurchased Busted Tees, which evolved into TeePublic in 2013. The company was acquired by Redbubble for $41 million in 2018. Josh has expanded his diverse portfolio to include Purcell Wine and The Loyalists, and extends it into several early-stage tech investments and a venture partner role at First Mark Capital since 2013. We're going to shed light in Josh's journey and dabble in subjects such as community building and marketplaces, and scaling and investing and more. And we'll see how much we can cover. And Josh, once again, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you. I love your journey, and I want to start with CollegeHumor. And I want to go back to 1999. When you had really long hair. I don't know if you actually had long hair. Did you? What was your hairdo in 1999? Were we?
It was a worse version of what it is today.
Good. I feel like that goes for everyone. Yes. Okay. So I'll try and picture that. So we're going back 1999, and when you and Ricky Van Veen kicked off this journey, posting funny pics and jokes on your freshman year in college. Love to learn, how did CollegeHumor actually get started, and what was the original goal, and what were you trying to achieve?
Yeah, so, when I went to college, it was an interesting moment in time because most people in their freshman year of college in 1999 probably didn't have high-speed internet when they were living at home. And then they get to college, their first day, they have a brand new computer and they have high-speed internet. So people didn't really know what to do with that yet. So, as we were killing time in the dorms, one of the popular things to do was just like literally email each other, jokes and like short video clips and pictures and that sort of thing. And eventually there were a couple kids on my freshman year hall who had servers set up on their desktops that had just like, folders full of funny pictures and videos. And right around that time, I had just gotten to college. I didn't have a job and needed money, and was trying to think of a way to make money without having to go work at like the campus bookstore or whatever. So my best friend Ricky and I, who we grew up together, and Ricky knew how to build websites. I did not, but the idea was really, I think the idea of having a media business really came from my brother was actually one of the early employees at advertising.com. And I remember him telling me about some of these, companies that he was sending, $20,000 and $30,000 checks to every month just for placing a banner ad on top of the page, which seemed like an unbelievable amount of money to us at the time. So that was really what put it, planted the seed of like, okay, if you can build a website and get people to come to that website, you can make money. Like, that was simply
step one. You can make money
yes.
if you bring people to a website. What led you to think about, what was for College Humor, right? So what led you to go in that direction then?
We messed around with a couple ideas, and honestly, it just seemed like the best idea that we had at the time. And as I said, people were passing around all these funny videos and pictures, but there wasn't really like a definitive destination. Obviously, this is many years before YouTube and Facebook and anything like that. So there were a couple other small niche comedy websites, but we thought we could do something better. And initially, it was really just taking viral videos and pictures and things like that and just posting them on College Humor, and it was totally user generated, and then we would put our own sort of editorial layer on top. But the first version was just like a dump of pictures and videos that we found on the internet, and then sure enough, it just grew very quickly, and was super exciting. Within like 3 months of us starting the business, we were getting checks for more money than either of us had made in our entire lives up until that point. So
Right.
It felt super exciting, and it was also a unique time because the .com bubble had not yet burst. So the reality was you could just put some ad code on your page and get a check every month, and you didn't have to worry about building an ad sales team or having an ad server or really anything that we would later have to figure out. So that was 99, early 2000. Fast forward a little bit, the bubble did burst. All of that went away. And that was really when we started to have to build the business in earnest, because you could no longer just get, $5 CPM by placing a generic, run of network ad code on your page. And then I had to actually figure out how to, really make money on a website.
When that bubble burst, did that make an impact in terms of the community? Like the people that were uploading and
No, it was really just on the monetization side. I mean, the growth on the traffic side was pretty steady, and we worked out a lot too. I mean, we were was constantly out trying to come up with clever ways to get more people to the website and doing cross marketing with other popular websites at the time and that sort of thing.
Was that helpful?
It was super helpful. I mean, that was probably the best thing that I did was, and we started to like productize it as well. We did this thing called Link Swap that we built, which basically, we architected College Humor in such a way that we had, this was like a couple years later, but there were a lot of, we called them hot links. And it was basically just like a link dump of like interesting things on the internet. And there were a handful of other websites that had a lot of traffic, and we could send, in some cases 100, 200, 300,000 uniques through one of those links. So we would cut deals with, other content websites where, you send us traffic and then we would give it back to you. And, we had ways that we would sort of qualify, like, whether the traffic was US versus international or that sort of thing. And so it was really, a lot of effort went into figuring that out. And that was a big part of how we ultimately grew. And of course, there was, things that would just go viral as you would expect. And that was the organic side. But, the bigger driver, I think, ultimately was just figuring out, the right traffic partners.
When as it was organically growing, what were the first users, I'm guessing university students? I mean, like from the university, or you know, because I remember in college when Facebook just started, and I was at Boston University, and we were one of the first ones after Harvard and all that, like, to start seeing it. And so it was that explosion within this tight-knit community. Was it similar in your case?
For sure. The first users to College Humor were our friends, and then the next level was, I literally took, made like thousands of copies of like funny pictures and jokes and things, and would go and hang them like above the urinals in all of the bathrooms on campus, and saw very quickly that we were getting a lot of traffic from that. So then I drove to like every school in Virginia and did that, and then found friends at other schools and would send them flyers and a t-shirt or whatever. And like, so that was,
I wouldn't underestimate flyers. I think flyers can still work. I like that idea of on the bathroom. Yeah, you can't escape that.
Yeah. I think especially, there's a lot of things that we did that maybe worked 20 years ago that wouldn't work as well today, because there's so much more noise. Everything's so much more competitive.
Yeah. Or maybe it's like we've gone back and flyers on a bathroom stall is exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, maybe.
I think Alejandro is not backing up for this.
Yeah.
I like this idea, and I'm going with it. No, very cool. That's awesome. We have a question here from Jim. Jim's asking, what motivated keep you going after a dot-com bust? Would have been easy, just take the money to the bar. So what led you to, like, after that, you were fully invested in it, or what led you to keep going?
So I think the first 18 months of starting College Humor was like by far the most successful thing I had ever accomplished in my life up until that point. And not only were we making what was a lot of money for college students, maybe not a lot of money by tech, startup standards today, but felt like a lot of money to us. And it just felt, it was really exciting. We were really enjoying it. And the audience was there. We had built this big website. There were a lot of people coming every day. So, getting a taste of that and like understanding like, oh, this can be a real business. I think, up until that point, it was almost too easy. We kind of just like built this simple website, and we're getting checks.
You hit a nerve.
We had no
you hit a nerve with the right time, with the right community.
So I think it was that challenge of trying to figure out, how do we actually make money on this website where, we don't have advertisers, we don't have ad networks anymore. Like, we actually have to like maybe sell them something. And that sort of led us to the t-shirt business. And that was when I think I really got to be a better entrepreneur, and actually had to figure it out in a real way, and learned about, how to make ads more effective, because we were no longer just charging CPM. We were making money based on conversion and clicks and that sort of thing.
I'd love to hear your story of how Vimeo came about. Can you actually share that? How did you think about Vimeo?
Yeah. So, like I said before, we were really building lots of different products, and I always sort of viewed College Humor as a means to an end. So even though our team was small, we were, we had all these little businesses that we were trying to do. And Vimeo was really a side project for the first couple of years. My business partner, Jacob, who was for a long time our only engineer, there was a moment in time when people started to get, not even camera phones, but like flip phone or flip cams, and like, Flickr had been really popular. So the idea was really just to, enable people to upload videos that they had made and share them with their friends and family. So, pretty, ubiquitous idea today. But at the time, you really couldn't upload a video to the internet unless you had some like pretty sophisticated, tech chops, because it wasn't, there were no websites where you could do that. So
FTP.
That was the first idea. Yeah. Where you, could just drag and drop a video and have it, viewed on a website. So he built that, and I was like, this is cool. YouTube didn't exist yet. So we were a couple months before YouTube.
What year was this?
This was late 2004. YouTube launched in early 2005, I believe. So So we had a period of time, and it's come out later that the YouTube guys were watching what we were doing very closely, even though we didn't
That's
know they
crazy.
existed.
Wow.
But the truth was, right around that time, College Humor had started to become much more of a thing. We had moved to New York. We'd had a lot of publicity. We were getting, MTV and News Corp and all these big companies that were talking about buying us. And so I was pretty focused on that. And Vimeo, partially, we'd been sued a couple times at College Humor for copyright issues and, uploading a video that we didn't have all the rights to. So I was very nervous about the legal ramifications of having, a user generated video free for all. So I made it very difficult for people to upload copyrighted material to Vimeo. It was really for a video that you took, that you owned, that you were sharing with your friends and family. YouTube started a couple months later. They took the opposite approach. Obviously, they were very well capitalized. They didn't have another business that was attached to them that they could, destroy the value of if they got it wrong. So they really leaned into the copyrighted material, and YouTube became, the biggest hit that YouTube had was a Saturday Night Live sketch, right? Lazy Sunday. And so I think,
Yeah, remember that.
so we were working on Vimeo, but it was a side project. And then we saw YouTube go, and when YouTube first started, we were aware of them, but we were kind of neck and neck in terms of traffic. And all of a sudden, YouTube just exploded, and within a year was acquired by Google for $1 billion. So we were sort of like, okay, well, maybe we got that wrong. So I sort of viewed Vimeo as a failure early, and we continued to work on it, but it was just like, we felt like, YouTube had beaten us at what we were, trying to do, even though we were trying to do something different.
Meanwhile, you're also, like you said, you're placing a ton of emphasis on College Humor.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah.
So in 2006, we sold a 51% stake of all of our businesses to IAC, and the three companies that we were operating at the time were Busted Tees, Vimeo, and College Humor. They were really buying College Humor. They didn't, Vimeo. I don't even know if Barry Diller knew what Vimeo was when he bought our company.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
So we didn't really get compensated for it, but we figured, well, we still own half of it. So if we turn it into something big, or any of these things into something big, we'll be able to capitalize, we'll make money on the other end. So shortly after we sold the company, we sold a niche content business to a big company 2 years after Facebook and YouTube had started, right? So like the world was changing very quickly. We didn't quite realize the extent to which it was changing, and they certainly didn't either. So, while we had this like crazy, hockey stick growth, right after we sold, that growth started to slow. So, if you know anything about Barry Diller, not an awesome person to work for, especially when things are not going perfectly well. So,
Yeah.
we were sort of like, all right, well, like College Humor, it's still doing well, but it's not growing like we thought it was going to. So we have this thing, Vimeo. It's pretty cool. Like, let's pitch Barry on why we should build this into something. So we took it to him, asked him for a couple $1 million to invest in a bigger team and try and like have a real go at Vimeo. He was into it. We did that. We built, basically the Vimeo that you see today in terms of like the look and feel and everything else was all developed right around that time.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I didn't know that. So this was, you had the sale, the 51%, but then you went back and you said, give us some additional capital. Let us invest more of our time and energy into Vimeo. And that's what you did. And that was like a year or into having sold it, or?
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it.
So we did that. And then, fast forward another 18 months, we grew Vimeo a bit. We built really excellent software. We were the first, platform to offer HD video. The site looked great. It functioned really well. It was a lot of great things about it, but it also just was losing more money with each week that passed because the cost of bandwidth was higher back then, storage, like all of the
which is still a problem now.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine back then.
Yeah. But also the way that our deal was structured, half of that money was basically my personal net worth. So
Yikes.
we were in a tricky situation where, the more money that Vimeo lost, the more money that we lost. So if College Humor was worth, call it $100 million at the end of the 5-year period, when we had our put, and Vimeo had lost $100 million, then we were going to get nothing. So we were basically forced to put half of our net worth into, a Series A stage startup. So that was, a difficult spot to be in, and ultimately led us to make the decision. I felt like we'd lost to YouTube, didn't have a clear monetization path for Vimeo. We had tried, doing the ad thing, and that just was like nowhere near close enough to pay for the cost of operating the website. The idea of doing, a pro account, like premium memberships, didn't come for many years later. So we ultimately, got our money back from Vimeo and pushed it into another part of IAC, and kind of, went back to work on our other businesses. I didn't anticipate it having an $8 billion IPO, later.
Did you retain any equity on that, or no? Or at any point in time during its rise, were you like, hey, let me get back in there, or no?
So we asked for, basically a retention of some amount of equity. I mean, I owned 35% of Vimeo at one point, and then I owned half that much, and then I owned 0. And we had asked for, some token amount of equity. But the reality is, when you've sold 51% of your business to a company like IAC, and you are, you're working there, they're your bosses, there's, your hands are tied behind your back.
Also, how old were you there, Josh? Because you're still super young.
Yeah, 25.
That's amazing.
Jesus,
that's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And you're dealing with like season,
Yeah.
parents.
So that was the other thing, is like, you realize people like Barry Diller, who have had this level of success that he has, know when they have leverage and they use it to their advantage. We had very little leverage at that time. We also, it was very emotional for us because, again, half of our net worth was in this business that he ultimately controlled. So we basically had a gun put to our head that said, either you continue to finance this business out of, your balance sheet, essentially, or we're going to take it all away. And when you looked at how much money Vimeo was set to lose over the next several years, there was a good chance that we would have, liquidated all of our, remaining value in the business, for a business that, from their perspective, of course, they would take that risk. They're a huge company. What's a couple $1 million a year to them?
And yours is your entire life savings on the line. For them, it's just another year doing something that's fairly small. And in hindsight, everything, right? Oh my God! But there are way more companies that have a sad ending versus what happened with you. That it just happened that you have.
That's crazy.
You created so many really incredibly powerful companies and loved by so many individuals. It's amazing. I wanna talk about a couple years past 2011. You decide to buy Busted Tees back, and then you spawned it to TeePublic and launched it 2 years later in 2013. What led you to go back? And actually, just one thing before this. I always love asking this, and I'll never get tired of it, but in hindsight, looking back, are there certain things that you recommend now for founders to keep an eye on, or questions they should be asking themselves if they ever come across these types of opportunities where you have a partner, you have someone that might be interested in acquiring you, from that journey, or even future journeys that you have related to the acquisition or sale of something that you've created? Any thoughts around that, on pitfalls to avoid, or lessons?
I think this is an obvious point to anybody who's, done multiple deals, but it was not obvious to me when I was 24 negotiating it. Selling 51% of your company is a horrible idea in most circumstances. You're giving up control, and you still have so much skin in the game. So it's, it becomes very emotional, right? Because when things aren't going perfectly, I think when I did the math in my head, I thought, okay, so I'm going to get all this money today and we still own 49%. So if it's a home run and it becomes worth 10 times as much, everybody's going to be happy because, we still retained this much. If it goes to zero, okay, like at least we sold half. That was sort of how I thought of it. And the reality is that like neither of those things are the more realistic option. It's probably going to be somewhere in the middle. And that's what it was. It was, it was fine, but it wasn't great. And now we're sort of stuck in a way and don't have. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I was gonna say, if you were to go back, what would you have done? Would you have sold a majority of it? And again, I know now we know that Vimeo ended up doing all these incredible things, but part of what your advice is, would you then say, don't sell 30% or sell 40%, or ask yourself the following question, but like don't either give it all up once you give ownership, or take a couple chips off the table.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know what?
I think taking chips off the table is always the right thing to do when you have the opportunity to do so. At the time, we also had a term sheet we had a couple term sheets, but one of which was from a private equity fund that was going to give us the same amount of liquidity as IAC gave us, but we would retain control. But we didn't have a path to exit. So they were going to have, a preferred on the business. They were going to, there were some benefits to having a guaranteed path to fully exit the business. And that was ultimately why we chose the IAC path. I've definitely wondered in the past, what would have happened. I mean, obviously, had Vimeo become what Vimeo became and we had done that deal, it would have been, a lot more lucrative for us. But I also don't regret how it went down. I think I learned a lot of lessons. I think, putting yourself in a position where, you're at the, mercy of a billionaire who, doesn't need you, but you need him or her is a bad place to be.
Mm.
So I think, you know, the difference between running a business that was my company that I'd started and running that business within the, construct of a publicly traded company was a very different experience, and one that, I don't ever wish to experience again.
And Josh, you mentioned one had a clear path to exit. Can you color in a little bit more about that? What do you mean by
Yeah.
that?
So we sold 51% of the business, and then we had a put that allowed us to force IAC to buy the remaining 49% 5 years into the future.
Ah, got it.
So,
Okay.
and of course, as things changed, that deal changed. So they ended up kind of forcing us to push it out a couple more years in exchange. We wanted to buy a television production company, which turned out to be a really good deal. But in doing that, they made us push the put even further. So when I left 5 years later, I had always expected that I would be selling the rest of the business, but I didn't end up selling the rest of it, for a couple years later.
Got it. And there's a question here from Santa who asked the dilution, why it happened so quickly. Was there from that 49% that you had left to zero, were there phases across that forced you within those 5 years to like slowly start
So yeah, there were a couple moments. I mean, the dilution on the Vimeo side was separate because that was basically, we agreed that we would get back all of our capital investment in Vimeo in exchange for giving it away, basically. And
yeah.
that was after, kind of coming to the conclusion that we didn't know how it was going to be monetized. It was going to lose a lot of money, and we weren't really structurally in a position to continue to run the business. I also lost another co-founder during that time, or two co-founders, I should say, which,
That's brutal.
made it a little bit, and they were like really the visionaries behind Vimeo. I was more, the business guy. They were Jacob, invented it. He was the coder. My business partner, Zach, was, this incredible product and design guy.
So like your core team, your go-to co-founders, just, I had no clue. They bounced earlier. And
yeah. So we basically had a situation where it's like, okay, we have this money losing thing. The two most talented people on the team have left. So I'm going to bet
What are my options?
yeah, I'm going to bet half of my net worth potentially on this startup. So that was,
Gotcha.
again, I think were we independent, you can, spin it out and raise money for it separately, and maybe you get diluted, but you still retain some equity. But that wasn't an option for us just because we were already part of IAC.
So a couple of years later, you buy Busted Tees and you launch 2 years later, T Public. I want to ask you, because we were talking about the marketplace, and I want to make sure that we and with T Public, I know Richie shared with me, like, his shirt is from, right? Like, you've done a lot of T Public purchases. Yeah, everything. So you got fans from T Public. What are things that for founders out there that are creating in a similar type of business model that you did with T Public, what are things that they should be aware of when you are talking about a marketplace? What are things that you concentrate on when you bought it and you went back and you said, all right, it's ours now, let me implement so and so and so? What are things that you have in mind that allow you to really concentrate on, prioritize, like, where to invest your time and resources when it comes to this marketplace?
Yeah. So I think when we built Vimeo and we thought about like the community that was, and we saw the community that existed there, it was really a function of my business partners and I were making, there weren't that many people making videos in New York, and not like now where everybody's making video, but
Right.
we kind of knew all the people who were making like highly produced stuff, like short form content for the internet. So we got a lot of those people to contribute to Vimeo early on. And I think even when you look at the business today, it still has that feel of like creators. And obviously YouTube has gotten into that game too. But for a while it was, YouTube was kind of, or Vimeo was kind of the only game in town for that. If you wanted to have that sort of rich experience. And I think with T Public, I always sort of thought of it as like the Vimeo for, on-demand t-shirts in a way. And what I mean by that is like, you can build software that does all sorts of things for all sorts of different people, but I don't think people intuitively know to use it for anything other than what they see other people doing, if that makes sense. So like on Vimeo, like the most popular videos in the early days were my business partner Jake's like video blogs that he was making, and they were kind of quirky and like, creatory, and he was sort of like a Brooklyn hipster type, and like that's what it drew, in people that were like that. With T Public, when we first started the business, we seeded it with some handpicked designers that we thought reflected the sort of overall feeling and vibe that we wanted to have on the website. So as other designers joined, they see, well, these are the t-shirts that are selling, so I'm going to make something a little bit like that. So I think like a lot of these communities,
so highly curated supply side, when it came to like making sure that the designers, the first people within this place, it was a type of vibe and energy and quality that you wanted to project.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, people, because we would build different features and have sort of wishful thinking moments of like, oh, people are going to like use it for this, or like people are going to, upload their Instagram photos and make t-shirts or whatever. And rarely would it happen just because we built the feature. It would happen because, we got a group of people who were influential who would use the business in that way. And I think, that exists across all sorts of different, marketplaces and platforms where people tend to not be super creative with how to use these tools, and they sort of do what they see everybody else doing.
Josh, how many employees did you get to manage, and did you count them kind of like, because they're all in many ways parallel business? How do you see those numbers, and what was your big takeaway of like, which environment did you find it easier or difficult to work on, since you were the business co-founder as well, right?
Yeah. So CollegeHumor, when I left, was about
110 people, I think. Busted Tees, when I bought it back, was 6 people. And by the time I sold TeePublic, I think we were like 50. For me, I sort of like the 10 to 40 or 10 to 50, like, you know, something about, you know, knowing everybody, you know, pretty well. Just feeling like you're a little bit closer to the ground. I've never had, you know, a huge company with thousands of employees or anything like that. I don't think that that would be something I would love. You know, I find that, you know, when even at College Humor, when by the time we got to 100 people, I wasn't really doing anything anymore. I'd, you know, hired a VP of everything that I used to be in charge of. So, you know, which was satisfying in a way, because you know, you learn a job, whether it's marketing or sales or, you know, finance or product or whatever, and then you hire people who who are hopefully better at those things than you are, and then eventually it's like, okay, well, I've got, you know, I have 5 direct reports, and like they kind of, you know, have it. You know, I don't really need to, which is, you know, an early mentor of mine told me, as a CEO, you should try to make your job boring. And I always took that to heart, and I'm, you know, I'm probably a lazy person at baseline. So if I can, you know, and I think that sort of helps when it comes to delegating. I know some people like want to do everything themselves. I'm happy to get other people to do things, and but you know, I like to be involved, and like I said, I found that, you know, that sweet spot of sort of, you know, having a few dozen people as opposed to, you know, 100 plus, for me was always a nice place to be.
Yeah, along those lines, and more aligned with what I've been working on with the current company. And my favorite question: have you had an episode in any of these 3 companies where are you familiar with that Elon Musk kind of fail where he goes on stage and with the bulletproof, and basically is the concept that some individuals do not like to raise or problems to the top, surface problems to the top. Well, have there been a situation where you found of a big problem like 6 months too late or something that you could have probably wished that you know, you're like, oh, that would have been tackable if I would have known 6? Has there been one that sticks out? Not quite as the Elon's, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting when we sold TeePublic. I felt like the growth was slowing. And then when we started to go through the process and we had a term sheet and we started to negotiate the long form documents, the growth of the business started to increase. You know, the trajectory, you know, that trend was reversing to the point where, like, as weeks we actually, you know, the reason we sold our business for $41 million, not $40 million, it was supposed to be 40. And at the final hour, it was like, well, this is, you know, we got to do something here, because so we got that extra little bit of money, because the trajectory, even in like the few weeks that we were finalizing the deal, it was changing. And then, you know, the business continued to grow, you know, it tripled or
changing in a good way.
Yes. Which is better than the alternative. But, you know, the business went from the year I sold it, did, you know, a little over $40 million in revenue. And then 3 years later did 150 million without any help from the acquirer. Wow. And what I realized afterwards was we had a very large takedown request from a big media company, the biggest, or one of the biggest. And it was really, you know, scary, because we thought, all right, this is like an existential threat. We have to please these guys. And there's a lot of content that was, you know, gray area, whether it was truly parody or whatever. So we kind of went through and took down a huge portion of the content on TeePublic that we thought could potentially upset this, you know, large copyright holder. It was like an all hands on deck kind of situation. What we realized later was it was done incorrectly, and as a result, our you know, Google did not like the way that we did that. So it took us the better part of a year for our organic search to right itself after that mistake. And nobody really told me that, and I didn't, you know, understand it. So had I known that, not to say I wouldn't have sold the business, but I think, the reality of like what the growth trajectory was hidden by the fact that we had this major hiccup in organic search
Wow.
that took, a year to present itself.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
incredible.
Yeah.
I wanna open it up for anyone here that has a question for Josh. And while you're thinking about, because feel free to text it, but while you're thinking about a question, I have one last thing, Josh, which is looking back from all these companies, what do you feel you realize now in hindsight that you did right? And then what are things that that you can share for founders out there that are in their first company or even beginning their second company? You've had enough experience of starting a number of companies and taking them through incredible stages. What are things that you did right, and then what are things that you believe founders should keep an eye on, or any pitfalls or any lessons, any additional lessons learned?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've done best is I think I'm pretty good at hiring great people. And, like I said before, trying to make my job boring has always been a priority, even though I don't want to be bored all the time. But I think, finding people who are just better than I am at all these different areas and being able to, like I'm not really a good micromanager, but I think I'm good at hiring people that don't need to be micromanaged. So that's something that I think, you realize, and I felt this when I sold my last company. For a while, I didn't have another project, and all of a sudden it's like you're on an island. I was a CEO for 20 years of a company that I'd started and always had a great team of people. And then you realize when you don't have that team and you're just kind of left to your own, just how much leverage you lose day to day and your ability to do stuff. So I think, it's obvious, but having great people is, like, for me, the most important thing. I think in terms of things that, I see people maybe make mistakes around is like just thinking through, like, for me, having started a lot of different things and a lot of things that we're not talking about because they didn't work. I think, I always like to get, like, you can be having like beers with your friend and talk about like this idea, and everybody like goes home and like gets excited about it. And like, it's great. But until you start to actually do it, you've really just scratched the surface on whatever the idea is. And you have to, like, act as though you are all in on this, whatever the thing is, for, at least 3 months before you really know, like, oh, like this thing is actually much more difficult than I've realized, or this opportunity is even bigger than I realized. But more often than not, I think it's like, oh, this is like how this is going to be challenging in a way that I didn't expect. And I think, like, figuring out how to take that first step in a way that, you're not like, necessarily quitting your job or, putting anything major at risk, but giving it enough time to breathe, to say like, all right, is this actually working? And then, before launching TeePublic, I had built this other business that was another e-commerce business. And we spent like 6 months on it, invested a decent amount of money, and then, realized, like, as we were doing it, like, this isn't going to work, and then just stopped it. And I think having the discipline to say, all right, like, it's a sunk cost, like that's okay. Like, I'm going to do this other thing, because I think the worst place you can be as a founder, in my opinion, is, you know, like dragging out a company that doesn't ever have the legs to get where you want it to be. But like, you can keep it alive. It's like keeping a person on life support when they're 100 and like can't see or talk or anything.
That's
It's
the
like,
hardest part.
yeah, and I think it can be really hard for, because it's emotional. You put in all this effort, but I think being able to say like, okay, this isn't working. Like, I should try something else, and sort of being a little bit disciplined about, the timing of those things.
Anyone, I was taking a look here while we were discussing here. Any question? All right, so we have a question related to the exit event.
I can actually, Josh, more about you put in a lot of personal capital at some point. but at that point, I think you were still pre-family. Is that correct? Or did you already have, like, were you, how far in the, and my point is, you know, depending on where, where you were there now, a little bit, you know, fast forward, how would you go about it now that, you know, would you do the same thing, or like, do you look back and you're like, no, that's, you know, I would triple down on that, or like, you know what I mean? Like, how does it change having a family?
I started College Humor with $250. I didn't raise money for College Humor. When we did the TeePublic business, I was able to finance it out of cash flow of the existing business. I did have to put up money to buy the Busted Tees business back, but it actually wasn't that much. And it was, you know, I had a lot of, you know, equity and stuff that had built up at IAC. So it was, you know, I was able to make back what the purchase price within the year, because I, you know, it wasn't a whole lot of cash that transacted for that. So, so I've never actually taken that much financial risk with any of these ventures. It's always been, you know, my time and energy, you know,
And upside, and the upside of equity, like of things possibly happening.
yeah. So, you know, it really wasn't until I sold my last business that I started investing in companies in a way where it's like I'm putting real personal capital on the line. You know, the wine business that I'm working on a lot now, you know, I had to write a big check to make that happen, but I was, you know, I had the flexibility to do that. You know, I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not just sold the business. Right. So, so it's quite different. I think, you know, like putting the family aside for a second, just like my age, I'm 42. You know, I was doing a lot of this stuff when I was in my early 20s. You know, I feel like in some ways I'm the best version of myself that has, you know, existed yet, but I also feel like I don't have the capacity to do what I did 20 years ago in terms of like, you know, the work and the, you know, everything seems so much more difficult now. And I'm constantly questioning whether it's just that things are more difficult to build, you know, internet-based businesses because it's so crowded, or if I just know too much now, or if, you know, because when
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah.
yeah, and I know, like, you know, Y Combinator, that's a big thing, right? It's like you don't want people who are too old because they might, you know, not be willing to take that risk. And I think, you know, when I was 23, it was like, of course we're going to win. We're going to, you know, be successful, and we can do anything. And I truly felt that. Now I feel like everything seems so difficult.
That's great.
That's super honest. I love that. It's real. Even just getting up, every time I sit down now, I do the sound, and that's when I realized that I was getting older.
I'm 44 going to 45. Alex, are you 39?
I'm 38.
38, turning 39 this year.
Yeah, gonna go 40 soon. But
Come
yeah,
to the dark side.
I feel I was with my team that's younger, and we all were like sitting around in a room, and I did the like sitting down, and like no one was doing that, and I was like, oh my God, I am officially the old one here. But Josh, thank you so much. I want to thank you for your time. Really appreciate the honesty. Thank you for taking us through your journey, and like just being so authentic, and going back into things and having to remember. Me as a founder, even when you have to think back on things, especially when they're very hard, is still traumatic. You know, I still, you know, someone asked me something and I'm like, I don't know, I don't want to talk about it. And they're like, geez, like, take it easy, man. I'm just trying to learn something.
Just a question,
right?
Man.
Yeah, it's just a question. I'm like, what do you want? So I appreciate you, you know, taking us back in time and going through that journey. And I'll make sure that we, all the little nuggets and insights here we can share with the rest of the community.
Yeah, awesome.
And yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone here as well for sharing your questions. We try to incorporate as many as we could here within the conversation. So thank you all. And Josh, I'm looking forward to staying connected. And if there's any way in which the community can be of help, please let us know. That wine company that you mentioned, what's the name? Can we buy it? Where is that?
Yeah,
like,
it's called
can
Parcel. It's a wine retail business in New York, and then we have a wine bar on the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
So for New Yorkers in the call, what is it? What's the name of it?
It's called Parcel Wine.
Parcel Wine. What's the logo? Is there a
Parcel.
Oh, okay. So it's actual.
There we
Okay. I
go.
don't know if it's like for me, it's like, oh, it has like a bear on it, and that's probably the one. And I'll probably I wouldn't remember Parcel, but I'll get the bear one. Most likely might be another competitor too that had a bear in its
There's
picture
no
too. Yeah.
No bear.
I'm
The
like,
one
I
without
got
the
it, man.
bear.
It was delicious. You're like, wait, what? No, it wasn't a bear. It was an elephant. But anyways, I appreciate you, man. And thank you again for the time. And
Thank you very much.
go get that Parcel Wine for New Yorkers.
Thanks, guys.